Back talking with Randy Blankenship, prominent Northern Kentucky attorney. We want to change our focus here to the recent news of an increased number of student suicides within a local Northern Kentucky school district. And I want to start by saying that we cannot put the entirety of the blame on a school district. Uh, it's not rational, it's not a fair expectation. There are a lot of educators and administrators and counselors within the school districts of Kentucky that struggle with these same issues in their own personal lives. There are many educators and administrators who see the problems in their students, and they're sitting in the car at the end of the day, bawling their eyes out because there's nothing they can do about it, or maybe it's too late to do anything about it, or maybe nobody noticed it and it's too late. So we want to start by saying that you cannot put the full blame on the school system. But Randy, looking at the recent story, uh, seven student suicides in one school district since November. How do you comprehend that? How do you rationalize it? And how do we prevent it?
That's such a sad story. Um, you, you have to look at what's leading to this. I mean, I agree with what you said at the beginning. You can't entirely blame the school. Sometimes the school does bear some responsibility. I've dealt with a number of cases over the years with bullying in the schools and schools, some school districts being aware of it and doing nothing about it, and it leads to some disastrous consequences. Um, but sometimes it's not the school. Sometimes these things happen off school grounds, they happen on social media, things over which the school has no control. But when you see it happening so much within one district, you got to wonder if there is something going on there. What is causing this? Is there a bullying epidemic? Are the administrators been made aware of it? Are they doing anything about it? What can we, you know, what can be done? I mean, it's a really hard issue because a lot of times I think it comes down to individuals. I mean, sometimes it may be they've just got a bad family life at home and things look hopeless. Sometimes there might be something physically wrong with them to where there's an imbalance in their brain and serious depression resulting from that. Sometimes it might be they're getting bullied away from the school. Sometimes it might be they're getting bullied in the school. I think we need to look at all of the possibilities and figure out what is going on here because the you know the idea of kids feeling that they need to kill themselves is just unfathomable.
You
But
know,
I
I,
mean, but when my son was in school, when my son was in high school, he had two kids in his class kill themselves within 2 days.
right.
And so, I mean, it's not new to today, but it's a lot more prevalent, I think.
I think back though, and looking at these recent stories, it's young students, it's middle school students, it's
Yes,
elementary school students. I did not know at that age what suicide was. I'd
exactly.
never heard the word.
Well, and I said when it happened when my son was in school, he was a sophomore or junior in high school. I can't remember which. It didn't happen in the middle school level. It didn't happen in. I mean,
Right.
you look at how could an elementary school even kid even have that cross their mind to where they feel at that age so hopeless that they feel they have no choice but to end their lives.
But you know what I didn't have in elementary school or middle school? I didn't have internet access. I didn't have an iPhone in my hand. I didn't have social media. I didn't have any interaction with other students other than my friends who I spoke to face and looked at in the eye.
And I think that's a big issue because when I was in school, of course, we didn't have internet when I was in school, so I'm going back a number of years. But when we were in school, before all that stuff was out there, if we got embarrassed about something in our school, the people who witnessed it knew about it. Maybe there are people that they knew were told about it. Today, it's worldwide,
Right.
or, and so it's like not only that I did this dumb thing. Not only do I know about it, my family knows about it, and my friends know about it, but potentially everybody, all half the state knows about it, or half the
Right.
country knows about it, and you can't escape it as much. Ultimately, we've all done things we're embarrassed about or felt like we did stupid.
Right.
That was a dumb thing to do, and but you get momentary embarrassment, and you're generally would get over it because it wasn't like there's a permanent record of it. Today
Right.
there is.
Right.
There's just no getting away. And I think that contributes a lot to it.
And do you feel that the peer pressure that comes from other students or individuals their age having that access where immediately they don't just have one friend telling them something negative about themselves. They could have 50, 60, 70 friends texting them immediately within
Right.
a matter of seconds. Why don't you just go ahead and end it?
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry, but you're now complicit in what has happened.
Hmm.
But this is where we talk about parents sharing the responsibility.
Exactly. I mean, first off, if you're going to let your kid have social media, and they don't have to let them have it, um, you know, if you need to be responsible and make sure your kid is responsible. I mean, when our children were children, they're adults now, but basically we told them you have no right of privacy in this house. You want to do something, we're going to know about it. And we would keep an eye on
Right.
things because we wanted to keep them out of trouble, keep them from doing something stupid. And not that I really worried a great deal with my kids, but I wouldn't want them to hurt someone else.
Right.
Because I mean, I wanted to raise decent human beings, and I'll be honest, I think we did. Um, but we would jokingly say, you may be in your room, but that's not private. This is my house. We're going to check it out, especially if we saw something that made us think something was going on.
There's
There's a
such
lot of
an
parental responsibility here.
right, and there's such an ease of having shadow accounts now. Whether
Yes,
it's email or these apps that you can anonymously text your friends and say, "Hey, this is me. This is my private texting app."
right.
Or um,
That raises a whole new level of difficulty, which
is it
honestly didn't have when my kids were in school. I
is
mean,
it feasible to link social media accounts or communication accounts with a driver's license or a state ID or a federal ID? Is that feasible?
I'm from a technological standpoint, I'm sure it would be.
Right.
The other option would be have these social media accounts that only the parent can sign the kid into them.
Right. Well, they have those, but they're still getting
But they're not
around.
being used.
Correct.
A lot of parents are unaware of it. They're not being used,
Right.
and they've created too many basically back doors here
Right.
that you can get around it. We need to close those back doors basically, and make it so that the parents need to be able to be involved, but we don't need to have the technology working against the parent either.
When we talk about the accountability of the school districts,
Yeah.
I've had several educators reach out to me, employees of school districts in Kentucky reach out to me privately, talking about the numbers when it comes to suicide rate and
Yeah.
suicide attempts.
Sad.
And the most recent story, seven since November in one district. I have documented, and we're not going to speak about the school or the district currently, but last year alone, one department of one school in Northern Kentucky had 7 attempted suicides. No, one, how is this possible? Two, why are these numbers not being reported? And just yesterday, there was supposed to be a task force in Boone County about the increase in suicide rates with local leaders in the school district. I've not heard one word about it on the media. There's nothing on the school district website. There's nothing with local leaders. Was the public invited to this meeting? What was discussed? Where are these numbers? Is the school district keeping track of the attempted suicides, the actual suicides? How many students have been arrested on school campuses since the start of the school year? How many lawsuits have been settled? This is information that is imperative for the public to know, especially if you have a child in a local school district.
Right. Well, it's interesting you mentioned about that task force. I see nothing about that on the news. Yeah, that's a really important topic. But
Well,
they're too busy covering the
it was in a
Kardashians or
news
something.
story the day before the scheduled meeting.
Okay. I saw no invites going out to the public. It certainly did not get the publicity that you would think something of that would deserve. I think a lot of people would be concerned about that issue if they knew what was going on. They talk about the 7 suicide attempts in one school, in one section of one school. That is newsworthy, if nothing else, and have seen nothing about it. And I think if we sweep these things under the rug, the problem's just going to get worse. As to the why, There's probably a myriad of reasons why. But the one thing that's not going to help it is just sweeping it under the rug and
Right.
pretending it doesn't exist. And okay, I'm going to close my eyes to this and it's just going to go away. That's not going to work.
I understand the school districts that are remaining quiet, that are
Well, they have to
releasing very
protect the
guarded
student's
statements.
privacy, of course.
Right. But when they're speaking of the actual issue,
Right.
they're following guidelines so that they don't get sued.
Sure.
I get that. I will say that I watched the Boone County School Board meeting from last week, and the chairman of the board, Jesse Parks, was vocal enough, and I don't know if you can use the word brave anymore, but I feel that it fit the moment. He said, "I'm not speaking for the board. I'm speaking for myself, but we need parents to make sure that this device," and he held up his cell phone, you know, get rid of it for a few hours a day. Make sure you're
Hmm.
watching what the kids are doing on the phone. And I felt that was one person in an elected position
Good for
who
him.
who felt like he could speak. I'm not saying I agree with him on every policy he
No,
has. I've never met the guy, but I felt that was an appropriate statement for him to make at that time.
yeah, I don't know the individual you're talking about. I know his name, but that's about all. But I have to congratulate on that stance because you're right. I mean, there have been study upon study upon study showing that the more time they're spending on their smartphones, the more depressed they are, the more anxiety they have. I mean, it's not a positive experience. And the more time they're just exacerbating it, and it leads to a lot of these issues. I'm not going to say they bear responsible for all of them, of course, but it certainly doesn't help.
So again, there are several documented cases
Yeah.
of bullying in our local school districts. In your legal opinion, if a child reports that he's being harassed or bullied, or she's being harassed or bullied, and there's a physical altercation, um, if the student who is being bullied is removed from the class and put in a different class to get away from the bully, and nothing happens to this child who's assaulted them, is there a legal issue there? Is there an abdication of responsibility on the school's behalf? It would seem to me that the action should be taken against the student actually causing the physical altercation.
I agree. I mean, it seems wrong to remove the bullied when we're keeping the bully. But I've seen it happen.
Right.
And I think it leads to future problems because first off, that empowers that bully because he's just gotten away with it without any real ramifications. Maybe he does worse next time.
I think this is also leading, and I know because of the number of educators I've spoken to, educators are not, especially in Kentucky, are not extending their time in the classroom beyond their retirement.
Hmm.
The day they can retire, they're gone.
Right.
I've had phone calls and in-person meetings with educators who are in tears because the profession that they've loved for 25, 35 years, they cannot remain in because they're tired of watching, uh, again, suicide of students, or drugs are becoming a huge issue again in the school system. They have no control over discipline. If you try to discipline a student, you've got parents threatening to sue you, which goes back to that parental responsibility. This is causing an exodus of educators in the public school system. Is that something that you feel can be prevented? And is there a legal case there on behalf of the educators?
I think it could be prevented, and you hit on it with you said about parental responsibility. I mean, I look back when I was in school and when my kids were in school. When we got in trouble when I was in school, there was going to be worse waiting at home. Not that my parents were going to beat me or
Right.
anything; they were good parents. But I mean, they weren't going to go up and chew out the teacher because I got in trouble. No, I was going to be the one in trouble, and so I say there's worse waiting at home. It's like I got disciplined at school. I'm going to get disciplined at home. And today it's almost reversed. And we do want to put the blame on the teacher that they can't. My precious little kid couldn't have done this horrible
Right.
thing, and they probably did. Um, not saying teachers are infallible, but more often than not, they're going to get it right.
Right.
And so, yeah, I do think there's a real problem. I think that's a big part of the problem. Is you know, is that the parents are abdicating their responsibility
Right.
somewhat. Uh, on the other hand, I think the school's got to be careful about what they do as well. I mean, if you got a kid that's bullying other kids, that kid needs to face some ramifications from it. And if and the school can face real liability if they allow that bullying to continue.
If the school district is failing to record these numbers and keep track of these incidents, obviously that's of concern.
Sure.
Um, is there a legal issue if it is proven that the school district is intentionally hiding these numbers?
I don't know about specifically hiding numbers, but certainly hiding incidents could be because, you know, if you have a student who's bullying, odds are they're not just going to bully one kid; they've done it else other times. It's kind of like sexual harassment.
Right.
The guy who sexually harasses a woman probably has harassed others.
Right.
Same principle. Maybe they go hand in hand in some ways too when you think about it. But I don't know that they get in great trouble for not reporting the numbers. I'm not sure there's a mandatory duty to report those numbers. There should be, in my opinion.
Right.
There should be an obligation on the part of the school. And see, this is where the legislature could actually do something useful.
Right.
Instead of posing stupid laws like let's have 18-year-olds be allowed to carry guns, or let's bring guns into the schools and all this kind of silliness, let's actually pass a law that says schools need to monitor bullying. School needs to report bullying. They need to keep statistics on bullying. Then you might start to see some commonality
Right.
and figure out what's leading to the problem. I mean, when you deal with like kids with behavioral issues, one of the first things you always look for is what are the antecedents to the behavior? What led to the behavior?
Right.
Well, why shouldn't we do that for bullying as well?
I look at it as well as you just brought up the guns in schools. I carry a weapon every day. Some days it's for work. Some days it's for
Yeah,
self protection. I don't go bragging about it. I don't show people. I
sure.
don't tell people. Uh, but at 18, sitting in my English class at Boone County High School,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want there to be 20, 30, 40 guns in the school that weren't being handled by trained professionals.
Well, exactly. I mean, when you tie into the idea of all the depression, anxiety that kids are experiencing, then say it's a
Creates a
gun, add some
horrible
guns to the
environment.
mix.
Yeah.
It's not a good combination.
No.
But yeah. I mean, I'm not against guns by any means.
No.
I don't carry one regularly, but I've got several guns in my house
Right.
for protection. I have nothing against guns. My son's a hunter, or at least he used to be.
Right.
But he's in the army. He certainly used guns.
Right.
So
The,
I mean,
the difference is, and
I-
I would point
they're
this
trained.
out to the good representative T.J. Roberts in Savannah Maddox. Even if you're in the military, you don't just get to carry around a weapon.
No,
The military has some of the toughest gun restrictions in the world.
that's exactly right.
They're all accounted for. They're kept in an armory unless you're an MP. If you have a weapon and you're not authorized to have it,
That's
you're
serious.
going to the brig.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, he had a weapon he would use on duty.
Right.
He had his M4, and he would use that.
It's just
But he didn't
asinine
carry
to
it around the
me.
base.
Yeah, it's asinine to me to think that we need to give an 18-year-old a handgun to carry around. And then to allow them in public schools. You know, there was a plan when I ran for governor because we were having so many issues at the time. The budget of the Commonwealth of Kentucky is large enough to have actual physical security in every public school,
Yeah,
which is needed. If we can put physical security in airports, sporting arenas, government buildings, why the hell can't we protect the kids?
I have. I have that is an issue that's bothered me for years
It's
because
a
it's like how many more kids do we have to have shot up in our schools
right
before we say at the very least
out of a $30
we're
billion
going to put some
budget.
security in there.
Right out of a $30 billion budget, you can't find $220 million to protect the kids.
Right.
It makes zero sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense. And then you make it worse by you having some of these people saying, "Let them bring the guns in.
Yeah,
Let's add more guns in."
it's backward.
It makes no sense. There's no logical sense.
Who's gonna
But
hold the responsibility if that law is enacted? The first time there's a massive school shooting in the Commonwealth, is it Savannah Maddox or T.J. Roberts?
Oh no, they're going to say the solution is to have more guns.
I can't fathom that.
Well, that's because you're using logic, which doesn't apply.
Definitely not in the legislature.
Absolutely.
One of the things I want to mention here when it comes to the student suicide rate, sometimes nobody can predict this.
Right.
Parent
Right.
can't predict it, a doctor can't predict it, the school district. Sometimes it's something internal, and it's a tragedy. It's unforeseeable, and nobody is to blame, not even the student.
Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, there's been situations where, well, back, like as I mentioned, when my son was in high school, two girls committed suicide. One, you could see it coming. The other was completely unexpected. Never saw it happening. Never had no clue. And yeah, sometimes it is just as you say, just a tragedy that really no idea how you could have prevented it.
Yeah, and we could sit here all day and talk about, you know, telling the family sorry, or sending thoughts. There's
Sure.
nothing you can say, nothing you can do to make them feel any better,
No,
other than maybe preventing it from happening again.
that could be the only thing.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I mean, thankfully, I have no idea what that would must feel to go through.
I can't
I
imagine.
cannot imagine, but I cannot imagine anything more tragic than losing one of your children.
Right.
And I have to think a lot of times, probably unjustifiably, but I think probably when that happens, sometimes parents probably feel pretty guilty, thinking, "What did I miss? What could I have done differently?"
Right.
And the truth is probably nothing.